Hello, everyone. Now we're going to take a look at a couple of topics, if statements and code blocks. We want to talk about how programs flow in Python and how Python selects what code to run. And if statements and the conditionals and Booleans we talked about in the previous overview are a good way to get started on that. In general, in Python, code is executed in a file from top to bottom. Um, there are special cases where it's not. If you remember the old back in BASIC, like go-to statements, programs can skip around, but in general, basic Python code executes from top to bottom in a file. And Python also can execute specific blocks of code based on conditions or certain statements. And we will talk about how to write a code block, how to put values in a block based on a conditional, and what that syntax looks like in Python. You may be used to if statements and code blocks in other languages, such as C++, C Sharp, and Java, and typically those code blocks are put in good old squiggly brackets. In Python, it's a bit different. Blocks of code are based on the level of indentation to the left of a line. So let's begin. We'll do an if statement so I can show you flow control, blocks of code, and a conditional choice all in one. So let's use our handy dandy variable spam, and we're using a Python file for this overview. So I will post this to GitHub and share a link. Also, just so you know, this goes along with the readings for week 2. In this week, we're looking at chapter 2 and 3 of Automate the Boring Stuff. This would be in chapter 2. About, I think, a third of the way through the chapter. So if you're looking for the kind of full overview of everything that I'm going to talk about, it will be in there. So back to the code. We will create a variable spam and set it equal to 42. So we've created our first line, and now we want to, let's say, print different things based to the console window based on what the value of spam is. So we can use if statements, conditionals, and code blocks to do just that. So an if statement in Python will just be if, and you can put a space and spam equals, double equals, because we're comparing 42 and a colon. So a couple things that you're going to notice that's a little different in Python compared to what you may know before. So first off, where's the parentheses? You don't need them. In this case, we can just write if spam equal or is equal to 42. That's our conditional statement. And then we use the colon to signify that it is the end of the conditional statement. Now, we want to do something if spam is equal to 42, and we want to print to the screen. Now, if you're using a tool like Visual Studio Code, it automatically indents you. If you're in VI or Emacs, you may have to indent yourself. But let's, in this case, print to the screen. Hooray. And that's all we want to do. So if the variable spam is equal to 42, print hooray to the screen. In this case, it's going to print hooray because we set spam equal to 42. If spam is not equal to 42, it skips line 8 completely. So we're going to add one more print statement at the end of the file. Print end of the line at the end of the script. So if spam is equal to 42, let's walk through this together. So we set spam equal to 42, and then we evaluate whether or not spam is 42. If spam is 42, we jump to line 8 and run the content in line 8. If spam is not equal to 42, line 8 is omitted because this code block right here will only be run if the conditional is true. And then finally, where we jump back out, and line 10 is outside of that code block. So whether or not spam is 42 is irrelevant. Line 10 runs no matter what the result. So let's save this file and jump to our command prompt, and let me just maximize it here. Python if.py. Hooray. Okay, so we know spam was equal to 42. We met that condition. We jumped into the block. And then that block finished. We read one line in that block. It popped out of the block, and then jumped to line 10 of the code, which was end of the line, and that printed no matter what. Now, if we go back and change our code, and we only want to run this condition if spam is not equal to 42. Save that file, go back to the command prompt, and we'll run it again. We notice all we've printed is end of the line. So that code block print hooray only runs if spam is not equal to 42. So if we walk through the evaluation of this code, we set spam equal to 42, jumps to line 7. If spam is not equal to 42, well, we didn't meet that condition, so it jumps over line 8 and goes right to line 10. So that is a basic if statement. Now, one other note before we jump into else and elif or else if. Remember, blocks of code can be more than just one line. So if we wanted to run two statements within this if statement block, so print, yes, it is 42, and we want to go ahead and save that and run it again. We see that we now run two lines within that conditional statement. So a block can be any length. It just doesn't have to be one line. It can be more. So we can use else, just as in other languages, to do something if the conditional isn't met. So else, colon, so an else statement, so again, else corresponds to an if statement. It's the catch-all. So if the if statement isn't met, it goes to else. It also ends in a colon, and you begin another code block. So I wrote a code block in line 11 that just prints to the screen, nope, it wasn't 42. So if we save this and run it again, we're going to see what we did in the previous run. Yeah, it was 42. Hooray, end of the line. Now, if we change this to 43, what's going to happen is we jump to this if statement. It's going to say is spam 42. So it's going to say is spam equal to 43? Is it 43 equal to 42? As it evaluates, that's going to be false. So it jumps down to this else statement, and else is the catch-all. So you're going to run the block of code here, and it's going to print, nope, it wasn't 42. It's going to jump out back now to line 13 and print end of the line. So we'll go ahead and save that and run it, and now, nope, it wasn't 42, end of the line. So those are else statements in Python, and again, your code block after the else statement can be more than one line. And then else if in Python. So in other languages, you're probably used to writing the word else, a space, and then another if statements. It's just elif, E-L-I-F, and then another conditional. So if the first conditional isn't met within, so in this case, if spam is equal to 42, does not evaluate to true, then it would jump down to the first elif, and you would write another conditional. So spam equal to 43. So we're going to ask, is spam equal to 43? And we'll print close enough. There we go. So let's set spam back to 42. Let's talk about what's going to happen. So spam is equal to 42. This evaluates to true, and it's just going to go into this block. Once this block completes, it's going to jump all the way down to line 15 because that if statement is complete. If we save this and run it, we see that's the case. And now, let's change spam back to 43. Let's walk through the code and talk about what's going to happen. Spam is equal to 43. If spam is equal to 42 is the first if statement we hit, that's not going to evaluate to true. So now it's going to jump down to this first else if. And it's going to say, okay, else if spam equals 43, and that will evaluate to true. 43 equals 43. So it's going to print close enough, and when that's done, it's going to jump all the way back out to line 15 because this conditional is complete. Save it. Let's see if this is the case. And as you're doing your labs and your quizzes, you should be doing this as well. Again, each time testing, making sure it works. So here we see close enough. It ran the proper line and end of the line. So here it jumped to line 11 properly. Now, if we set spam equal to 44 and save, it will print, nope, it wasn't 42, and jump down to end of the line. Now, I know we've used is equal to a lot, so the equal conditional, but we can substitute other conditionals as well. So if spam is less than or equal to 42, if spam equals to 43, is spam not equal to 43? So let's set in this, say, let's set spam to 40, and we have the conditional as spam less than or equal to 42. Save it. Now let's run this, and it will hit, yes, it is 42, because again, we added this conditional, so we're going to tolerate any value less than or equal to 42 to make this true. So just be aware, it doesn't have to be is equal to. You can put any of the conditional operators we talked about in. Also, we used integers. I'm going to set this back to equals for a second. Let's say spam was Bob. We can ask, is spam equal to Alice? Else if is spam equal to Bob? Yes, it is Bob. Yes, it is Alice. Nope, it wasn't either of them. So we can use this with strings too. So here with spam equals Bob, I got everybody mixed up here. It says Alice. Yes, it is Bob. I'll save that. Now we know spam is Bob, so theoretically, if we run this program, it should, if spam equals Alice, this should evaluate to false because Bob does not equal Alice. It'll jump down to this first else if, and it's going to say, is spam equal to Bob? Yes, absolutely, that's true. It's going to jump into this code block right here. When that's complete, going to jump to line 15 because the if statement is complete. So let's save and run. Yes, it is Bob, end of the line, excellent. And if we swap the value of spam from Bob to Alice and save it, this is going to go to 8 and 9, and then it's going to go to 15. So I will save that. And we see that our program evaluated properly. All right, so that is that's if statements. That's basic flow control. Oh, you know what? There's one more thing. The binary Boolean operators. So right now we just looked at one variable and compared it to a value. Eggs equals 20. All right. So we can use and, or not. when comparing if statements as well. So let's do this. So if spam is Alice and eggs equals to 20, we're going to do this. And if spam is Bob and eggs equals 19, we'll do that. This is Alice and eggs is 20. Yes, it is Bob and eggs is 19. Nope, wasn't either of them. So we can use ands and ors and nots in conditional statements. There's a lot of good examples in the book, but I wanted to show you here that you can throw that in if you want to compare multiple variables, and in the case of not, if you want to inverse the value of a variable. So let's go ahead and save this. So what's going to happen here? We declared a variable called spam, set it to a string Alice. Declared a variable called egg, set it to an integer of 20. Now we're going to do an if statement. And we asked if both, because we're using and, spam is equal to Alice, and eggs is equal to an integer of 20, then execute the code block in lines 9 and 10. In this case, that will run. So if we save it, we go back to our handy dandy command prompt and run it, we see that yes, it is Alice and eggs is 20. Hooray. And then it obviously jumps out of that block and onto line 16. If we change this to Bob and 19 and save it, what is going to happen? Well, line 8 is no longer going to evaluate to true. So Python's going to jump to line 11 and it's going to ask, well, is this true? Yes, it is. So it's going to execute the code block starting at line 12. This code block completes at the end of line 12 because there's only one line, and it jumps down to line 16. So saving the file, running the file once again. And it's Bob and eggs is 19. And one last item here. If we set this to Arizona iced tea and eggs is 9999, what's going to happen? Well, these two statements aren't going to evaluate to true. It's going to jump right down to else, essentially our default statement here, and it's going to print nope, wasn't either of them, and end of the line once the code block completes at line 14. Save it, run it. Our code works, and that's our overview of conditional. So again, please read the much more detailed information in Chapter 2 under ifs and code blocks. And in the next video, I'm going to go over loops, because loops and conditionals and if statements are going to be important for this week's lab. Talk to you soon.